Hello there, friends and enemies, and welcome back to Weird Deck Techs, the show where I take a look at Yu-Gi-Oh! Archetypes that are kind of underutilized by the fanbase, take a look at them, and see how they work, maybe get other people interested in them. Today we're looking at what I believe to be the first manga-only archetype, as in it was only shown in the manga and wasn't shown in the anime, and that is going to be Dinomist. Released in early 2016, Dinomist is an archetype used primarily by Shingo Sawatari in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc V Strongest Duelist Yuya manga. Shingo is not in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc V anime, but he does have an anime counterpart that does not use the Dinomist archetype. Dinomist is an archetype that is primarily made up of level 4 and level 5 water-type pendulum monsters whose pendulum scales are either a 3 or a 6, respectively. Gameplay-wise, they revolve around getting other Dinomist monsters off of the field and sending them to the face-up extra deck in order to get some sort of benefit out of them. They also have a connection to the Draco Slayer archetype, which gives them a little bit of a fun boost in one specific card in general, which is Dynamite. That being said, there's not much more I can say to introduce this archetype to you, so we'll go ahead and take a look at the archetype now. And here we have my Dinomist deck. If you haven't been here before, here's how it works. I make a 40 card deck as pure of an archetype as possible. The reason for this is to take a look at the archetype itself and sort of highlight the way that it works without anything else. I go ahead and go over every individual card that makes up the deck. We're going to take a look at gameplay, and then we will talk about our thoughts on the deck and the archetype as a whole. So let's go ahead and get started with Dinomist. We're going to start here with 3 copies of Dinomist Spinos. Pendulum effect: if another Dinomist card you control would be destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, you can destroy this card instead. Monster effect: you contribute one other Dinomist monster, then activate one of these effects. This card can attack your opponent directly this turn, or this card can make a second attack during each battle phase this turn. We have 3 copies of Dinomist Rex. Pendulum effect: once while this card is in your pendulum zone, you can negate an activated card effect that targets another Dinomist card you control, then destroy this card. Monster effect: if this card attacks at the end of the damage step, you contribute one other Dinomist monster, then activate one of these effects. Either this card can attack an opponent's monster again in a row, and if it attacks a defense monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent, or shuffle one card from your opponent's hand at random, or their side of the field to the deck. This card gains 100 attack. Following that up, we have 3 copies of Dinomist Ceratops. Pendulum effect: if another Dinomist card you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can destroy this card instead. Monster effect: if all monsters you control are Dinomist monsters, minimum 1, and none are Dinomist Ceratops, you can special summon this card from your hand. 3 copies of Dinomist Brachion. Pendulum effect: once while this card is in your pendulum zone, you can negate an activated card effect that targets another Dinomist card you control, then destroy this card. Monster effect: if you do not control Dinomist Brachion in your monster zone, and your opponent controls a monster that has the highest attack on the field, even if it's tied, you can special summon this card from your hand. 3 copies of Dinomist Terran. Pendulum effect: if another Dinomist card you control will be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can destroy this card instead. Monster effect: when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can add one Dinomist card from your deck to your hand. 3 copies of Dynamite Powerload the Draco Slayer. Pendulum effect: you can target one Draco Slayer or Dinomist card in your other pendulum zone, special summon it. You can only use this effect of Draco Slayer once per turn. Monster effect: this card is always treated as a Dinomist card. If this card is tributed, you can add one Draco Slayer or Dinomist Pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand, except for Dynamite. You can only use this effect of Dynamite once per turn. 3 copies of Dinomist Plesios. Pendulum effect: once while this card is in your pendulum zone, you can negate the activated card effect that targets another Dinomist card you control, then destroy this card. Monster effect: all phase-up monsters your opponent control lose 100 attack and defense for each Dinomist card you control. 2 copies of Dinomist Stegosaur. Pendulum effect: if another Dinomist card you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can destroy this card instead. Monster effect: if another Pendulum monster you control battles an opponent's monster, after damage calculation, you can destroy those monsters. 3 copies of Dinomist Ankylos. Pendulum effect: once while this card is in your pendulum zone, you can negate an activated card effect that targets another Dinomist card you control, then destroy this card. Monster effect: banish any monster destroyed by battle with a Dinomist monster you control. Moving on to spell cards, we're starting off with 3 copies of Dinomist Charge, a continuous spell. When this card is activated, add 1 Dinomist monster from your deck to your hand. Once per turn, if a Dinomist card is added from the field to your extra deck face up, add 1 of those cards to your hand. You can only activate 1 charge per turn. Ending out the spell cards, we got 3 copies of Dynamic Power Load, a field spell. All Dinomist monsters on the field gain 300 attack and defense. If a Dinomist monster you control battles, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step. Moving on to trap cards, ending out the deck here, we start off with 3 copies of Dinomist's Howling, a continuous trap. When this card is activated, you can place 1 or 2 Dinomist Pendulum monsters from your deck in your Pendulum Zone, but you cannot Pendulum summon monsters until the end of the next turn, except Dinomist monsters, even if this card leaves the field. Once per turn, if this card is already face up in your spell and trap zone, you contribute 1 Dinomist monster, then target 1 card your opponent controls, return it to the hand. 2 copies of Dinomist Eruption. If a Dinomist monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, target 1 card your opponent controls and destroy it. And last for the deck, we have 3 copies of Dinomist Rush. Special summon 1 Dinomist monster from your deck, and if you do, it is unaffected by other cards' effects. Also, destroy it during the end phase. You can only activate 1 Rush per turn. So there we have the full, pure version of the Dinomist deck that I have come up with. We'll go ahead, plug it into Dueling Book, take a look at how it might play on the field, and then we'll come right back here and talk about our thoughts on the deck. Alright, so here we have our first hand, and it's looking pretty good, at least from my perspective. We have Dinomist Rush, which we can go ahead and set pretty immediately. We have Dynamic Power Load, which we can activate right off the bat. That goes ahead and protects our Dinomist monsters during the battle phase. We can go ahead and normal summon Ankylos, which I think would be a relatively good idea in this case, because we can set our Dinomist Rex right into our Pendulum Zone, and we have double protection there. If that wasn't enough, we also have Dinomist Rush here during our opponent's turn. If something happens to go wrong, we can activate Rush. We can go ahead and grab out a monster to help us out, kind of keep us alive during that turn if we need it. And if not, we can bring out another Dinomist during our turn to use for maybe another Dinomist effect. Let's go ahead and draw just to see what we might get on our second turn, and we have pulled a Ceratops. Not the greatest card that we could have pulled, but because all of the higher level Dinomists are only level 5, that gives us ample reason to have an extra Dinomist out to sacrifice for Ceratops, which means Rush could be used to get out just material for Ceratops, or we could use Ankylos if we're really feeling like keeping Rush on the field. So there we have Dinomist. So what are our thoughts on this deck? Overall, I can understand why this deck isn't necessarily utilized. It seems like it could be a pretty slow deck, not super powerful. However, I do think this deck could be fun to run simply because it is just a bunch of shenanigans over and over and over again, at least from what I'm seeing here. Taking a look at other people's deck builds, it looks like the 2 most common types of builds for this deck are to lean into the water aspect by putting a bunch of generic water support or mixing it with another water-centric archetype, or it seems like a lot of people tend to use this as an Xyz starter deck. So because most of the monsters are level 4 and the rest of the monsters are level 5, you can basically just use this to get out some good, cheap, generic, fun level 4, rank 5 Xyz monsters pretty easily. So that's the Dinomist deck. I'm feeling pretty good about this. This deck seems pretty fun. I do like pendulums, but it is really hard to find a pendulum deck that is good or plays fun, but this one seems to be really simple, really straightforward, really fun to play, and I think this could be a fun deck to try out if you were ever interested. How do you feel about Dinomist? Go ahead and let me know down below. I hope you found something to enjoy about this video. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, as always, drink your water.